Doom 2016 is one of my favorite games, like, ever. The combat, the music, the level design, just everything.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Doom Eternal took that whole framework and just sort of dialed it to 11. More demons, more guns, more environments, just more everything.
You can't just shoot a hole into the surface of Mars.
A few moments later.
And now Dark Ages has landed. It's been out for a while, and I've been playing the hell out of it. And while I'm still sort of thinking where it ranks for me in the series, I can tell you this. Doom the Dark Ages is fun as hell.
You got that?
Assault mode engaged.
Yeah, man, I love this game. The guns, the environments, the shield parries, and the very good boy. And like, yeah, it's not without its faults, which I'll get into, but Doom the Dark Ages proves that it is still the king of the fun zone. And I want to talk about everything, so let's just orbital drop right into this thing. And I mean, what better place to start with than taking place between Doom 64 and Doom 2016, Dark Ages sees us stomping around as the Slayer during all-out warfare between the Night Sentinels, the Makers, and the forces of Hell in Argent de Nur. The Makers have essentially total control of the Slayer, deploying him when needed like some sort of weapon of mass destruction. On the side of the Night Sentinels, we see a couple of returning faces from Eternal, like King Novik and Commander Valen, or the Betrayer as he's known in Eternal.
It is your people's time now to give penance, just as it was mine.
We also see King Novik's daughter, Commander Thera, as she leads the Night Sentinels. There's also Bishop Creed, one of the Makers, and this guy is just immediately suspicious. And I mean, if you've played Doom Eternal, which I assume you have, then you know the Makers are kind of a bunch of selfish jerks.
Who are you? A human, once a mortal, to defy our traditions.
And like, speaking of total jerks, we have an honest-to-goodness, just straight-up bad guy here with Prince Azric, who has got to be one of the most generic-looking villains of all time. And while he leads the forces of Hell, he's also searching for the Heart of Argent, a MacGuffin he needs to, well, I guess, become a god or something?
I can never rule as king, so long as you one they fear.
Shut up, bitch!
And as the narrative unfolded through my first 20-ish hour playthrough, I kind of found myself caring less and less about what was going on. I think Doom 2016 had the best form of storytelling in the modern Doom games. 2016 wasn't too interested in lengthy cutscenes or, convoluted plot devices. You were the Slayer, and you had essentially one single objective.
Rip and tear until it is done.
And even in a lot of the moments that took control away from the player, they showed how impatient the Slayer was becoming with the whole situation, and how he just wanted to get back to, well,
Rip and tear. Until it is done.
And if you wanted more than that, there were codex entries for you to find and read. I just think it provided as much story as any player wanted. And Eternal did turn that up a notch, giving us a lot more cutscenes and lore, but even then, it wasn't really too much to handle. They added some Slayer backstory and made fan speculation canon.
I fucking knew it!
But here, they go full tilt into narrative. There are cutscenes at the beginning and end of each level, with new characters and a whole lot of new lore implications. And on one hand, I think a lot of this feels like how games were back in the 7th gen gaming era. When we got a whole lot of new IP, and games really started to become a lot more cinematic. And I can appreciate that. I really have a huge soft spot for those games. But man, I just did not find this interesting at all. Characters have no personality to speak of, outside of the Slayer still being, angry and annoyed all the time.
Payment required.
And the main baddie, Azric, is just super bland and one-dimensional. Like, he's just a bad guy. He wants the heart of Argent to become a god, and that's pretty much it. And after reaching the Cosmic Realm, I actually thought that he was just gonna be a sort of red herring, and that maybe the witch that's with him would become an even greater threat. But that just sort of never happened. And there are certainly some cool cinematic moments, for sure. Like the section where the Slayer is basically too angry to even die, but I guess I just really prefer that stripped back storytelling that 2016 had. And I know they want to have this grand scale war setting, but I just wish they had found a way to make the plot more interesting, or treat the whole thing with the same impatient attitude that the Slayer had in Eternal, and especially in 2016.
Everything has clearly gotten out of hand now, yes. But it was worth the risk, I assure you.
But while I can certainly say that I really wasn't into the actual narrative or the plot in this medieval sci-fi war, I gotta say, I cannot fault Doom of the Dark Ages when it comes to actual art direction and design. Man, does Dark Ages look awesome. This sci-fi fantasy mashup isn't something that's new at all, really. It's kind of Warhammer 40k's whole deal. But what the artists at id have come up with here is pretty incredible. Argent D'Nur consists of these floating cities and castles. There are foot soldiers with full plate armor, but also with radio comms and assault rifles. Castles have flashing red emergency lights alongside lit candles and braziers. And you'd think that sort of style would clash, but it works really well here.
Someone cooked here.
And because there's an actual war going on, both on the ground and in the air, there is just so much spectacle on screen. You can see ships dogfighting, ground troops fighting for a foothold, and Atlan mechs fist-fighting behemoth demons. There are some environments too that still maintain that heavy metal album cover feel that 2016 and Eternal had. Like, it's just freaking awesome, dude. And about halfway through the game, you'll get to that cosmic realm, and this place looks sick as hell too, dude. The greenish tint to everything, tentacle beasts, and the architecture that makes no sense, like, it all just works. And while it may be a bit jarring to head into a Lovecraftian landscape in a game about, a medieval war on hell, I think this is actually easily one of the highlight sections of the whole game. It's worth mentioning too that a whole lot of these environments have destructible objects that really add to that sense of destruction that the Slayer causes. And not only do they break, but often in believable ways with realistic physics. And despite its mandatory ray tracing in the Dark Ages, this still ran super smooth for me. So you've got these super cool looking environments, destructible objects, and great lighting, and it all just runs great. And I'm actually really curious to see if Panic Button will be able to do some black magic and get this thing running on the Switch 2 in the future. But while the Dark Ages has some truly spectacular art direction and visuals, when it comes to presentation, there's still one aspect that is a massive downgrade. And you already know that it's I don't think it's really an exaggeration to say that Doom 2016 and Eternal have some of the absolute greatest soundtracks in gaming. Hell, maybe the best soundtracks full stop. I mean, those soundtracks composed by Mick Gordon are just so damn good. And the music really integrated into the gameplay in a way that when I envision Doom in my mind, I don't just see it, but I hear it. And yeah, the elephant in the room is that there was a huge falling out between Mick Gordon and id Software. So sadly, we just don't have him returning for the Dark Ages. And instead, we have music composed by Finishing Move Inc., a production team that also worked on the Callisto Protocol and Halo. And while losing Mick Gordon definitely sucks, dude, I was actually really looking forward to what a new Doom soundtrack might be. And man, it is definitely a step down. And while I do think that Mick Gordon set an astoundingly high bar, and I'm not sure anyone will ever be able to quite match what he produced, I still think what we got here plays it a little too safe. And don't get me wrong, I actually think some of the tracks, like Unchained Predator and Blood Red, are pretty damn good. But they also have elements that I wish they used in more of the tracks, you know what I mean? Like, Blood Red has bits of this choir. And I wish they could have used this in more of those tracks to fit the fantasy theme of Dark Ages. It reminds me a lot of those tracks in Eternal that had that sort of throat singing, is something that I just think would have been right at home in the Dark Ages. So yeah, it just seems like they played it a bit safe when it comes to a lot of the music. And it seems like id kinda knew this, cause the audio mixing puts the music far into the background where you have to adjust the audio in order to even hear it properly, almost like they're ashamed of it. And that really sucks, cause like I said, while definitely not on par with the soundtracks of 2016 or Eternal, the music here really ain't half bad. Though it is worth mentioning that the track At Doom's Gate makes absolutely no appearance here, and I mean, that honestly might be the worst sin in this whole game. And I know that up until this point, this review has kind of been a bit mixed, with me talking about that forgettable story and a soundtrack that can't quite meet the standards set by old Mick Gordon. But when it comes to the actual meat and potatoes of what makes a great Doom game, the Dark Ages is fun as hell. I think it's well worth stating right from the top, this ain't Eternal. Eternal is fast, like super fast. And for some people, it was a bit too much. You know, hot swapping weapons, targeting weak points, juggling resources. I mean, it's a lot, like I get it.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
But for a lot of other people, Eternal has become the absolute pinnacle of first-person shooters. Like, I think it offered a gameplay loop that just can't quite be matched by anything else. I mean, for a lot of people, Eternal has almost ruined all other FPS games. And for a lot of that bunch, Dark Ages just isn't gonna be up to par with what they want. And I can kind of understand that. But Dark Ages is also not really trying to be Eternal. And so I think if you meet it on its own terms, there's a hell of a lot to love here. Combat is still fast, frenetic, and super satisfying. You're still running and gunning, you know, turning the forces of hell into mincemeat. But this time you're more circle strafing rather than double jumping and dashing around. And we've all heard it several times now, but it's been stated that in Doom Eternal, the Slayer is like a fighter jet, you know, staying mobile in the air through double jumps, air dashes, and bar grabs. And here in the Dark Ages, the Slayer is more like a tank, just an angry hulking mass stomping around the battlefield. So with that tank comparison and that tagline of, you know, stand and fight, you can kind of see where a lot of people got the impression that Dark Ages was gonna be a lot slower than Eternal. Now, I played the whole game from start to finish on Nightmare, and while I'll say that this is definitely slower in some aspects than Eternal, like, you know, with weapon swapping, Dark Ages is absolutely not slow. You can still zip around arenas and swap between weapons relatively quickly, but really where all the nuance in the game's speed comes from is the newly added shield and melee attacks. I mean, the shield saw is one of the coolest weapons in any game, dude. And that combination of a chainsaw and a shield offers up all the offensive and defensive capabilities you could really ask for. Enemies are constantly throwing attacks at you, and these will either be normal blockable attacks or these green flashes that, when timed right, can be parried, leaving enemies open to a counterattack. And while you can block those basic attacks, the shield has limited health, so after too many hits, it'll break, leaving you completely defenseless for a few seconds. And on Nightmare and above, this can be an absolute death sentence. So now you've sort of got to evaluate in a split second whether you're gonna, you know, tank those hits and lose armor and health, or if you're gonna block and potentially be left defenseless against a far more hard-hitting opponent. And aside from blocking and parrying, the shield also offers up the shield bash and the shield stun, both of which are extremely useful for both offense and defense. The shield bash can be used to slam into fodder demon crowds, dropping some ammo and health, but it can also be used to execute faltered demons from a distance that might otherwise be too far for a normal melee execution. But what I personally found it to be super useful for was when I was in overwhelming situations and needed a quick escape. You no longer have that dash from Eternal to be used for, you know, evasive maneuvers, but what you can do is lock onto a distant fodder demon and simply leave. You can get out of that situation, find some resources, reposition, and get yourself back into the fight. And early in my first playthrough, which like I said was on Nightmare, this saved me a ton. Cause in those early levels, when you have a more limited toolkit, demons can and absolutely will toast your Slayer buns. So that shield bash isn't just a fun way to, you know, destroy fodder demons, but it's a useful way to maneuver and get a breather if you need it. And the same goes for that shield stun. At any point, you can launch this thing like Captain America and it'll stun most larger demons. And you can use that time to, lay into them and kill them, or reposition and find resources. It can also be used to destroy the armor on demons after you've heated it up with normal weapons and take out those lines of shield soldiers. So the shield really becomes like this Swiss Army knife of a tool that can be used in any situation. You can use it to stun enemies, use it to farm resources, use it to escape certain death, or use it to bash demons into another realm of existence. And I really have to hand it to id for coming up with a weapon that can add that much depth to the core gameplay loop. But obviously, the shield saw ain't the only tool in the game, though, it could be for how useful it is. No, man, thankfully there's a whole roster of new and returning The weapons in Dark Ages, both in terms of aesthetic design and functional design, are just so cool. Just like in Eternal, you'll start off with a shotgun, this time being semi-auto rather than pump action, on account of the shield. And this thing is just a real workhorse weapon, dealing out consistent damage at a pretty fair range. And after that, you'll start building an arsenal of familiar and brand new weapons. Now, when it comes to more familiar weapons, aside from, the shotgun, there's the Shredder, this game's version of an assault rifle. Then there's the Accelerator, which is a lot like the plasma rifle in Eternal, primarily for use in destroying those energy shields. Then there's also a rocket launcher, great for dealing damage to those larger demons, as well as something else that I'll talk about in a bit, but if you know, you know. The Super Shotgun also makes a return, this time being lever action, a design so badass I don't really question the logistics of how that exactly works.
It's a 12-gauge double-barreled Remington, S-Mart's top of the line. You can find this in the sporting goods department.
But where I think the weapons get really interesting is in the introduction of the variants and those newly added guns. Firstly, there's the Pulverizer and its variant, the Ravager. The Pulverizer is that gun that we saw in the trailer that mulches up skulls and shoots the shrapnel like a minigun. And this thing might be the most heavy metal weapon in the game, essentially looking like a car engine with pistons and everything. And not only is this thing just objectively sick as hell, but it can be used against both crowds of fodder or soldiers, as well as larger demons thanks to that wide spread, making it super versatile. The Ravager variant is great too, trading that wide spread for a higher rate of fire, allowing you to absolutely chew through those more medium-sized demons like Arachnotrons. The Shredder has a variant called the Impaler, and this thing is definitely a contestant for the most overpowered weapon in the whole game. It fires what essentially look like railroad spikes,
Which it is.
and can take out a lot of enemies in just a few hits, and enemies like the Nightmare Imps can be taken out in a single headshot. The Cycler is a variant of the Accelerator and is in fact just a double-barrel plasma rifle. It fires slower, but does a lot more damage, especially when upgraded to chain lightning between enemies. The grenade launcher is a lot like the rocket launcher, but having an arc to the projectiles. And while it's not quite as powerful, I still enjoyed using it just because aiming the grenades to make a direct impact is a fun challenge to add to the combat. Finally, when it comes to the standard weapons, there's the chain shot, which is a lot less of a firearm and more of a ball attached to a chain. And like the Impaler, this thing is just ridiculous when it comes to damage output. Not only can it take out a lot of enemies with a single bonk, but you can charge up attacks to do more damage, destroy armor, and even give off an explosion when upgraded. And while almost all weapons have upgrades, like, increased damage or higher fire rate, some of them can actually change how you'll fundamentally use them. Like the shotgun can be changed to fire in 3-round bursts. But then you can combine that with an upgrade that makes demons burn. And on top of that, they'll drop armor, and you can make them explode, dealing damage to other enemies or drop armor shards faster. So, like with this weapon, you can tune it closer to defense or offense depending on your playstyle or skill. There's also the rocket launcher, which I alluded to earlier. And this thing's upgrade is so ridiculous, I'm honestly surprised it's in the game at all. With it, you can gain the ability to heal yourself by being in its blast radius shortly after a parry. So like, not only can you parry a demon's attack, but in that situation where a close range blast with the rocket launcher would typically, end in a swift death, you'll actually be rewarded. And I mean, even the shield has upgrades in the form of shield runes. And these are total game changers as well, charging up and activating when you parry. The ground fissure is the first one you get, and it sends out this earthquake that stuns and kills demons directly in front of you. The holy swarm sends out daggers that damage enemies, the auto turret fires at enemies around you, and the heaven splitter can shock and stun them. And they all have their own utility and use in combat. And a lot like Doom 2016, it really just gets to the point where you can have a character build going, almost like an ARPG, letting you lean more into defense, offense, or a mix of both. And as a final addition to your combat toolkit, there's of course the BFG.
Oh, shit.
Oh shoot, sorry, I mean the BFC. Cause yeah dude, what better way to bring back the BFG than to make it a crossbow? And despite it being a crossbow rather than a, well,
Big fucking gun.
It's still an absolute beast of a weapon, coming in clutch to help you clear out arenas of those bigger demons.
Holy moly.
So like, you've really got a roster of weapons that not only just look absolutely sick, but all have some serious utility in combat. You don't necessarily have the same ammo constraints that you did in Eternal, but you're still gonna want to swap weapons regularly. You can use the shotgun to both deal damage and get armor, and use the rocket launcher to get health when in a close quarters fight. You'll use the accelerator or the cycler to take care of those pesky energy shields, then swap to the shredder to eliminate shields or armor on demons. And the ammo economy is generous enough to where, like, sure, you could probably play the whole game with the super shotgun or the impaler, but when the weapons are all this useful and are all insanely fun, you'd really be doing yourself a disservice. Especially because they all really play well with both the saw shield as well as the other new weapons. The glory kills are gone. Well, mostly. You can actually still initiate a proper animated glory kill by attacking from above on faltered demons, but for the most part, you'll be punching, kicking, and beating demons to death with what is essentially a spiky baseball bat. And I mean, we haven't really seen melee weapons in Doom outside of the chainsaw. In 2016, you used your bare hands to rip and tear, and in Eternal, you had that really cool wrist blade. And you'd use your bare hands and wrist blade to perform those glory kills as ways to get health, and you'd use the chainsaw to get ammo. And with the glory kills, you had these predetermined animations, and they really felt core to the identity of 2016 and Eternal. You'd falter a demon, then go in from whatever angle and get a kill animation that was specific to that angle. It was awesome, and personally, I never got tired of them. Like, I play 2016 once a year, and crushing a soldier's head with his own foot is still pretty entertaining. That's gotta hurt! In Dark Ages, when a demon is faltered, unless you go in from above like I said, you'll either kick or hit the demon with whatever melee weapon you have. And according to Hugo Martin, the game's director, this was for pacing, so the gameplay wouldn't be slowed down with those kill animations that would stop you in place for a couple of seconds. And I mean, I kinda see what he means. In the Dark Ages, you get that slowdown effect during a kill, but you can still quickly look around and assess your situation upon doing it, which you couldn't quite do in those other games. There's also an issue of players finding those animations kind of repetitive.
To make sure that there's a good amount of variety. That's actually the point of this, is to avoid repetition so you don't see the same kind of animation again and again.
But I personally never found the glory kills in 2016 or Eternal repetitive, and I actually think they offered a brief respite from the constant shooting that you were doing in those games. Plus, they put you into an invincible state during that animation, so you could sometimes use it as a way to get out of a sticky situation. And while I do think that those kicks and slow-mo effects are pretty fun, I do still wish that they could have found a way to use more kill animations in a way that kept the momentum that they wanted Dark Ages to have. I mean, both 2016 and Eternal had those runes that allowed you to kill faster, so I just feel there could have been a way to have both. But while glory kills being out is definitely a disappointment, the actual melee combat, when woven in with the shield and the shooting, can be an absolute blast. Or maybe I should say it's a big hit.
Oh, brother!
You'll get access to 3 different melee weapons, those being the Power Gauntlet, the Flail, and the Dread Mace. And these act as a way to get resources, like ammo and health. And they all have attack charges that can be gained through parrying as well as pickups around the maps. You'll get the Power Gauntlet pretty much immediately, and it's capable of throwing fast hits and charges quickly, but that's about it. The Flail has fewer uses and is a bit slower, but can do damage to armor as well as cause enemies to drop armor. Finally, the Dread Mace, that, spiky baseball bat, is easily the strongest of all 3, able to kill most enemies in a single blow. It only has a single charge, and charges slow, but after you get this thing upgraded fully, this thing not only refills all of your ammo, but can damage nearby enemies as well as be triggered an additional time, allowing you to essentially drop any major enemy in one go. And like I said, when you're weaving these melee attacks in with the shield saw and the shooting, Dark Ages is just a ton of fun, dude. You just start to get into that fun zone, comboing attacks and dropping every demon on the battlefield. And you really do combo attacks. You're parrying, shooting between parries, then finishing with melee strikes. Or you'll shield bash, shield stun, then melee finish. And playing on Nightmare, I really got to grips with how to deal with each enemy. And by the time I was going back to 100% clear levels, I was absolutely dumpstering every demon I came across. And man, does Dark Ages have a lot of The lineup for enemies in Dark Ages is pretty excellent. Almost every enemy from past games has had some sort of design change, whether that be just aesthetically or an entire overhaul. You've got the return of basic enemies like soldiers, undead, and imps, and they act the same, more or less. But then, the Pinky Demon has had just a total overhaul, being ridden around and requiring a bit more work to put down. The Arachnotrons, Mancubus, and Hell Knights also all return, with new forms of projectile attacks, but then also having some variants with armor that has to be broken before they can be killed. The Revenant is also back, being this Grim Reaper looking guy, and is way faster this time, making the shield stun super useful when going up against it. The Whiplash from Eternal is also here, and again, the shield stun is super useful when coming up against it. We also see the return of a few boss enemies, like the Cyber Demon, the Vagary, and even the Hunter from Doom Eternal, who kind of acts like the Marauder from Eternal. There are also some enemies that are from that cosmic realm, like the Acolyte, who has these projections you have to take out before dealing real damage to it, as well as a Cosmic Baron, which kinda looks like a Hell Knight, but is way more aggressive. There's also this thing, the Komodo, and let me tell you dude, it has been a good while since an enemy thoroughly wiped the floor with me, but this thing absolutely whooped me the first time I fought it. There are others that I'm kind of glossing over, like the Lost Souls and the Cacodemon, which has had a total Lovecraftian overhaul, by the way. But there are a lot of great enemies in Dark Ages, and they're all fun to learn the attack patterns of and how to most effectively deal with them. There are also a few proper boss fights at story moments, and I actually really like these. Well, mostly. I loved the one against the Bishop Creed. Dodging all those waves, parrying, I mean, it was fun and challenging. I also enjoyed the fight against Azric, the first time. I enjoyed the parrying and learning the patterns, but man, this fight gets a bit repetitive. And later on, you'll do essentially the same fight again, but against Azric and the Witch. But aside from the Azric ones being a little repetitive, I really think these are a bit of a step up from 2016 and Eternal. So we've got new weapons, a new shield, newly added melee attacks, and new enemies to use them on. I mean, the combat sandbox has been pretty vastly overhauled. And since, we already talked about the combat half of that, let's move on to exploration and secrets have always been a big part of games like Doom, and they really doubled down on that in 2016 and Eternal. Those games were filled with extra side paths and hidden collectibles and Easter eggs, and I mean, Dark Ages is mostly the same. Mostly. Because while 2016 and Eternal were mostly these linear levels with hidden side areas, Dark Ages has a few of these larger open areas where you can really run around and explore. I mean, you do still have those more linear levels, but the larger ones really set Dark Ages apart. You'll basically be dropped in and are given a set of objectives that you can seek out in any order, and I really like these levels. Getting to really take in the sights and take my time with the encounters, I really only had a problem with them upon replaying to get 100%, where I do think they kinda start to wear on you, mainly because they can be so vast. And while you can full-on sprint in Dark Ages, it can still take a bit of time to get from one area to another. And I think this could have been alleviated by allowing the player to fast travel to a specific point before you hit that point of no return, kinda like how you could in Doom Eternal. But in these levels, you can still secret hunt and find these optional encounters, both of which you're really gonna want to do, since like previous entries, they directly tie into your progression. In 2016, you earn upgrade points by finding secrets and doing those mission challenges, which do make a return here by the way, and in Eternal, you'd find those upgrade tokens or totems. In Dark Ages, you'll find a few different resources scattered around that let you get those upgrades for the Slayer's arsenal and his shield, which can be unlocked at these shrines. Gold is the most basic currency, being all over the place and in some secret areas. Rubies are a bit more hidden and can be in areas locked by a secret key and get you the more medium tier upgrades. Then, the Wraith Stones get you the most powerful weapon upgrades, after which you'll get a weapon mastery challenge, sort of like in 2016 and Eternal, which here gets you a nice gold gun skin.
Nice.
Finally, in order to upgrade the Slayer's ammo, health, and armor capacities, you'll have to take on these field bosses, which are basically beefed up versions of the larger demons. And these encounters are probably some of the hardest in the whole game, pitting you against different combinations of demons and even having specific ways to beat some of them. Like, some of them require you to kill other demons before they become vulnerable, allowing you to finally end them. Some of these fights are mandatory, but others are optional, requiring you to seek them out around those bigger maps or in secret hidden encounters. But when you combine those secret areas, the new currencies, and the field bosses, I actually think this is probably the most compelling exploration and progression system we've had in the newer Doom games. And I think the actual secrets are good too. Like, yeah, you can see them on the map, but finding them isn't really the challenge. The challenge is figuring out how to get to that secret spot, or how to solve a certain puzzle. And you'll be rewarded with a new weapon skin, more currency, or even those little toys. And aside from the backtracking becoming, slightly tedious on repeat plays, I love that open level design. And funny enough, those larger levels aren't even the largest levels. I mean, I guess technically, those would be the ones where you take control of... I think the real takeaway from those trailers and early gameplay we got, aside from that sick new cape that the Slayer has and the lever action super shotgun, is that we could now ride a dragon around, as well as finally get to use that giant mech that we saw in Eternal. And I think this is where my opinion probably differs a lot from other people, because I kinda love these sections. I mean, they ain't perfect by any means, but I thought they offered up a nice change of pace from the typical run and gun combat. When piloting the Atlan mech, you'll get to stomp around linear areas, trading blows with other giant enemies, and occasionally getting to use guns to take them on. I mean, look at this giant shotgun. And while I do think these are fun and offer a pretty good sense of scale with the ongoing conflict visible on the ground, these sections, a lot like the dragons, which I'll get into, are just kind of painfully simple. And what I really mean by that is that it really could have gone a lot further in what they allow you to do. Fights just generally have you dodging attacks and trading blows. But since you only really fight one enemy type, there's no real variety in encounters. The only enemy that requires any different strategy is this one that can block, damaging you when you try to attack. So you actually kinda have to show a little restraint when engaging them. And I just think that if they gave you more tools, like they did with the shield saw, or gave you more enemy types, like maybe giant cacodemons or something like that, these areas would be a lot more interesting. What I will say though is that going toe-to-toe with a giant Cthulhu was awesome. And while I think these areas are a bit lacking in creativity, this fight was pretty spectacular.
Yes! That's awesome!
Of course, there's also the dragon riding sections, having you fly your mount over these wide open spaces, taking out objectives. And again, these areas are a lot of fun, but man, do I wish they offered up more gameplay systems or variety. You really do just fly around, dodging those green attacks and shooting the other flying ships, which don't even fight back. I mean, the flying feels pretty fluid and smooth, and I think that getting into actual dogfights could have been a lot of fun. Imagine getting into fights with those other ships, where you can throw up a shield to block some attacks, dodge to avoid others, and retaliate with the minigun or even rocket launchers. Or maybe you'd have to protect an objective from incoming demons, sort of like those turret sections that you have to do as the Slayer. And you do get to land and proceed on foot as the Slayer to take out these ships, and again, it's a nice change of pace, even within those levels themselves. But they play out the same way every time. Land, fight enemies, then hop back onto your dragon, and it's on to the next. And I was actually hoping that the game would wrong-foot you when jumping onto the back of the dragon, like it would get swiped out from under you by a giant demon or something like that, but it never really happens. So like, I do think that these sections are fun, and the dragon, Serret, is just extremely excellently designed. I mean, the laser wings and the missing eye, like, it's sick. But I just also can't help but see a lot of missed opportunities, and ones that hopefully can be fixed in the DLC. And dude, after playing quite a bit of this, I'm really looking forward to that DLC, especially if they can up the challenge and, you know, add some new gameplay mechanics and enemies. But look, man, this has been long. Let's wrap this whole thing up. The Dark Ages isn't my favorite Doom. I certainly don't think it's the best Doom either. But like, I had so much fun playing this that it doesn't really matter how it stacks up to the others. Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, and Doom the Dark Ages are all going for something completely different. And for me, Doom 2016 will probably always be my favorite. The way it handled level design, narrative, gunplay, glory kills, and that soundtrack, dude. Everything just came together in a way that I really love. And honestly, Eternal probably has my favorite core gameplay loop of the series. I loved the management of resources and the movement system with the dashes and the jumping, and the sound effect of picking up all the armor shards after a flame belch and grenade combo scratches a very specific itch in my brain. And now, after playing the Dark Ages, I think it probably has my favorite aesthetic, especially when it comes to weapon design. Like a lever action super shotgun, are you fucking kidding me, dude? And the whole sci-fi fantasy stuff just rules. Like, I love it. And like, yeah, it stumbles a bit here and there. Like, the story is just kind of forgettable. I mean, there are some cool moments for sure, but overall, I just didn't really care about anything going on. And the soundtrack is really holding back. It's got some good tracks, but at the same time, it just doesn't forge its own identity. And I mean, I missed the Fortress of Doom this whole game. Like, that was one of my favorite parts of Eternal. Having this place to get your bearings before heading back out, like, I feel that this would have been right at place here. You know what I mean? With it being this grand castle floating in space, I mean, it makes sense. But we don't even see how he gets it in this game. Still, I think for some people, this is straight up gonna be their favorite Doom, offering a huge variety in weapons, encounter design, and just being plain fun with the shield parrying and the melee attacks. And for a lot of others, the Dark Ages was never gonna be as good as Eternal, and they kinda wrote it off as slow or boring before it even came out. But for me, this is a perfect in-between of 2016 and Eternal. And with those difficulty and speed sliders, this one is going to have simultaneously the lowest barrier to entry and the highest skill ceiling. Like, imagine the sort of master levels that we're gonna see. People are gonna be absolutely tearing through them at max speed, and it'll be absolutely ridiculous to see. But like, with this whole thing being a prequel to the others, it's like, where do you even go from here? I mean, I know they have other games planned, but I kinda wish they'd round this out with the DLC and move on to something else. A trilogy feels right for this new era of Doom that we've had. Maybe it's time to move on. Do Quake. Do something new. I mean, imagine an id Turok game. Man, that would be, dude, that'd be sick. But you know, either way, I think id Software have proved that they know how to innovate, and that they really aren't gonna rest on their laurels. So like, whatever they do next, Doom the Dark Ages proves that both Doom and id have a bright future.